Welcome to On from this arms range facility. Commitment, though, is to always bring the facts about the industry and help our listeners and our customers responsible ownership of. Today on the show, guys, wow, I am so excited about $2.1 million people across the
$1,000 group life insurance policy, but is changing jobs and can't take it with him. Well, I shopped the many highly rated term life insurance companies we represent, like Prudential and Mutual of Omaha, and found Ray, who is 41 and takes medication to control his cholesterol, a 10-year, $500,000 policy for under $27 a month. That's almost twice the coverage for less than half of what he had paid. If SelectQuote hasn't shopped for your life insurance, you're probably paying too much.
For your free quote, call 800-589-5599. That's 800-589-5599. 800-589-5599. Or go to SelectQuote.com. Since 1985, we shop, you save.
Get full details on the example policy at selectquote.com/commercials, or price could vary depending on your health, issuing company, and other factors. Not available in all states.
Traffic and weather every 10 minutes on the 10s, mornings and afternoons. News Radio 610 WTVN.
Welcome back to On Target. This is live. What? I don't even know the date today, JC.
The 16th all day today.
All right.
And
well, we are back live. I
crazy.
apologize. This half hour is brought to you by Spectrum Fiber.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll leave it at that because it is extremely frustrating. But I apologize for that. But we are back, and we're going to the end of the hour. So no more commercial breaks. So I guess it is brought to you by Spectrum. So, JC, sorry about the gun of the week. We're going to have to get back to that.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it next week. So
there you go.
Sounds good.
Sitting to my left, he's been here all along, and it's someone that I met a few weeks ago, and we kind of met through a unique situation. You know, we did a speech alongside the governor, and we talked. We had an opportunity to talk about supporting more efficient system for getting information to the background check system as it sits today. And this gentleman reached out to us and said, hey, look, that's not a bad part of the overall proposal, but be cautious because some of the other parts of this proposal, specifically red flag at the time, are ones that a lot of the gun owners are going to have a problem with, and we've talked about it on the show. So we had a great conversation, and it didn't take long to realize that we're speaking the same language.
That's right.
And so Professor Anthony invited me to go up to Kent State, your home ground there, speak to some of the class, and we thought we'd have you down here to talk about some of your research and stuff.
Yeah.
So we welcome you. I know you've been here for the entire time here, but we appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And I want to say, even though I work at Kent State, I'm here as an individual just talking. I'm not an agent of the university, so I don't want to be a representative for them. Just what happens in the classroom. And one of the reasons I had that conversation is because I'm concerned about probably about 70% of our students want to end up going to law enforcement. And when you start asking them to go after red flag complaints and then start arresting people, it's a safety issue at that point. So people don't really think about it from that perspective.
They don't think through it, just like you said.
Right.
They don't think.
And that was the primary reason why I made the phone call to you, because I was speaking on behalf of the people who want to be Leos.
Sure, absolutely. So you have a neat perspective because you can hear firsthand from, and I call them kids, but from these kids that come in they're coming out of high school, they're still young, formidable minds, and they're in that college environment, which we always talk about is a lot of times left-leaning, I would say. I mean, it's kind of how it is. What are you seeing? I mean, when they come in, specifically on firearms and the whole debate, are they uneducated but opinionated, or where do you see when they come in your classroom?
I don't think they're totally uneducated. I think they have some idea of what's going on, but I think they, because of the way social media is these days, everything is opinionated. So they come in and they learn a lot more information, with the nuance about what all this is. And this is why I bring in folks that are in the industry so that they can hear the real stories. But one of the things that I've done is I typically in every class I ask them, how many of you have Democrat friends and family members that own firearms? And almost all of them know somebody who owns firearms. And so, it becomes very difficult at that point to think that gun control can actually work because, people from the left aren't going to go for it either if they're gun owners.
Right, and we have a lot. We have a lot of people who come in the store who maybe have political views that would lean left outside of the firearms debate. I mean, good friends that come in. So I mean,
absolutely.
It's just not divided right down the line on that.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's interesting to see that. So you've done a lot of research on mass shootings and gangs and so forth like that. We had a shooting this week in California, another school shooting. This one didn't fit the narrative of what the anti-gun folks like to see. It was a pistol.
Yeah.
Like happens most of the time.
Less than a 10-round magazine.
Right. Like happens most of the time. I mean, statistically speaking, that happens more than rifles. What have you seen in this research? I mean, has it been stuff that people would be surprised to hear about? Or, any...
Well, I've been doing this for a long time, about 20 years. I was born and raised in Colorado, and so Columbine happened while I was in grad school. And so I started working for the government for a while on drug intervention across the country, and I ended up in Moses Lake, Washington, where a math teacher was shot. And I didn't know I was standing in the spot that she'd been shot, and it sort of impacted me and said, I want to know the reason why this is happening. So early on, I started talking about the mental health issue. And when I was doing presentations, people came back and said, look, this isn't fair because people who have mental health classifications are generally way less violent than the regular population, or however they want to classify it. I don't know the political correct term for it. So please don't say that, because people with mental health classifications should still be able to defend themselves, right? If they decide they want to have firearms and exercise their Second Amendment rights, that should be a right. So I shut that down a long time ago. And I've been trying to educate people about mental health issues while people are saying it now. And President Trump has come out and said, it's a mental health issue. It's not a gun issue. In principle, that's true. But I think what we're doing is a broad brush of people with mental illness, and we really need to back off of that. There are people who are severely mentally ill. Back when Kennedy was the president, between then and Reagan, they were supposed to build 5,000 mental health facilities. They built half. And so, the pharmaceutical industry was saying that they could maybe help out with it with the drugs that they had. And it helps many, many, many people. But the people who are really severely mentally ill on the borderline of psychosis, and I'm not a psychologist, but it doesn't seem to be helping in that realm.
Right.
And so when I started looking at school shootings, it wasn't about all school shootings, it was a mass school shooting. And the federal government, of course, changed the numbers from 3 to 4 at one point, not including the shooter. And so that sort of changed a few things. But what we do see in the research is that the mass shootings are happening, 50% of the dead and 70% of the injured are coming out of, in schools, are coming out of these mass shootings. And I just saw that the Secret Service put out through the Safe Schools Initiative and the National Threat Assessment Center that they believe that they're ideating and doing all the things that they saw from the 2000 study. This is their third study that they've done. And so, there's sort of a profile, but not really a profile. But one thing is for sure is that they're ideating. So I get to see something, say something, which is the federal policy. They're trying to turn it into the red flag laws. The due process issue becomes a major concern for people. So, where do we go from here? If people are, we had somebody at Kent State actually get an award because they stopped somebody who was going to do a shooting. I think they arrested the person in Pennsylvania. That's a good thing, right? But the example that you gave earlier, JC, was, that's where it goes bad. If you don't have due process, it's a problem.
Right. And then, the thing you talk about how the numbers change. If I were to say to you that there were, and I just read this week, there were 250 school shootings this year. What I think comes to everyone's mind is like what happened in California this week. When I think of a school shooting, I think of these lone gunmen. They go in, and we've seen it time and time again, right? So these groups come out. This came out from Every Town Against Guns, or whatever they call it, right? So they come out with, there's been 250 school shootings. And I look at that, I'm like, wow, I didn't see that. But what they're doing, they're including every gang shooting that's on property. They're including, every drive-by. They're not being intellectually honest here.
Right. And that happens, and it's a school shooting.
If they want to talk that, they need to have, they need to qualify that statement, because everyone who is not in this like we are, you look at that and you're like, what? This is an epidemic. We have 250 school shootings this year, and they think it's like what just happened in California, and it's not. And that is, we see that from the school shootings. We see that from the mass shooting stats. I mean, it's just they manipulate those numbers without qualifying them, and it takes you to stand up here and say, wait a second, that's not, the same that you're comparing previously.
Well, the thing I tell my students is this, and just anybody I'm having a conversation with, look, they're taking the conversation down to a 2D world. Well, we live in a 3D world. Anytime you take a bivariate relationship, I mean, I'm a statistician by training, but if you just take two variables and you look at it, yeah, certainly things look bad. But if you put it in a bivariate world and you start controlling for gangs and you start controlling for suicides, we're one of the safest countries in the world, especially with the number of guns that we have. And there's a lot of people who have done this research. Is one of them. There's a few other ones. So, okay, let's talk about a 2D world if you want to, but it's not real. We walk in a 3D world. Everything is three-dimensional. So it needs more variables put into it to understand what's really going on with the problem. But it's politics, really.
It is. And it's, it's like we talked on this PBS special. There's many groups who are making careers around this debate. And sometimes I wonder if they want it solved. You know, I don't. I don't know. It doesn't sound like it.
Seems
you know?
self-evident that they don't
right.
want it.
Right.
You don't want it solved. You can continue to get that money coming in and do this research.
It just seems that way sometimes. So talk about gangs a little bit. I mean, that has to be, you know, when you delve into it, that is a huge number when you talk about the guns every year.
Yeah, I mean, the gang started with Thrasher back in the 30s when he was doing, before gangs were gangs ended up becoming a thing because the police decided to, over the Zoot Suit riots in the 30s and then the riots in the 60s in Compton. And that's what created the gangs. So the gangs, and then through the 80s and 90s with Freeway Ricky Ross and stealing cocaine and whatever the backstory is on all that, you guys can, you know, I'm sure you've talked about it. Well, that's where the gangs came from, and so they're making money off of drugs and weapons. But the biggest problem is that if we have broken families and the parent isn't there, in particular the father, this becomes an issue. And so the Crime Bill Act of 1994, because the Democrats for so long had been seen as soft on crime, when Clinton got into office, they made the Crime Bill Act of 94, which basically said we're going to get tough on crime, and the mandatory sentencing and 3 strikes and you're out in 24 states, I think, ended up happening. That decimated the family. It was never the intention. I think they suspected something like that would happen, but in the black community, there were 70% had 2 parents. This is all the stuff that Candace Owens talks about. By now, we have 30% of the black families that have. And so, you know, the same thing happens to Hispanic families. It's just an inner city issue, right? And so when you start breaking up the family in the way that funding for Medicaid and those kind of things, they sort of want broken homes. It's just policies that break it up. And so if the father's not there, then the boys end up looking for gangs to get their bonding from. I mean, this is the research I did was all on bonding. We can talk about it in another time, but you got to have the family together in a cohesive unit. It doesn't have to be mother-father, but there has to be a male influence in the boys' lives so that they don't feel like they need to go out there and get involved with gangs.
Right.
But it's happening to girls now too. I mean, they're redefining some of the definitions that are getting girls arrested a bit more often.
Wow. We're talking to Professor Vanderhorst, and you do a lot of classes on criminology, and you get in depth in a lot of this. Crisis intervention and stuff. What do you think? Do you have an opinion, or have you done any research? You know, Dad, if he was here, he would speak about the family. Right. He'd also talk about some of the social influences, video games, bullying. I mean, do you think, you know, when I was talking to this lady on Monday, I said, and she started off by saying, "No, don't you blame video games?" And I said, "Well, you know what, ma'am? When I was growing up, and even when my son was growing up, we were the house where you came to shoot the BB gun, and the rules apply to that just like they do on our range today. If the little kids, if they moved the barrel and it flagged everyone, we were done for the day, and they all cried. And I said, well, look, it's that important to know how to do this safely that we're going to be done for the day. But now you can go to these video games, and I enjoy them too. But you can go out there, and what was that stat, JC, that someone said
I was actually in Police Magazine, and the head police psychologist for Police Magazine said by the time someone is 18 years old, if they're a video game player, they have actually killed with a firearm in the game over 100,000 people. So by that time, they've already have done that. And I watched my son with his guys coming over shooting zombies or whatever, but it's all aim, bang, aim, bang, aim, bang, and that's what they do all day. And it becomes easier, I believe, and that was what the psychologist
What's
was saying.
your thought on it? I mean, do you...
I've seen the research say both things. I take a different tack on this. My concern is that every time a politician starts talking about gun control, people go out en masse and start buying firearms because they're afraid that their rights are going to be taken away, especially on the AR platform. Now you've got a lot of people who are buying up guns that probably aren't getting trained in it, and then that's creating the problem that is trying to be solved by talking about gun confiscation. I wish that they would just stop talking about it.
Right.
Or if they're going to do it, then start putting, with every gun that's bought, you have to go through a gun handling class. This is what I love about CCW. You go through a class and you understand it. And this woman that I was talking about in the first half of the show, her concern was, how do I do this safely? And that's the right answer. I say to my students this. I've got an 8-year-old in my life, and I said, she knows you never put your finger on the trigger. You know, the 4
Right.
basics, right? You never point a gun. If there's a gun in the room, get out and report it to an adult, and just always assume a gun is loaded. And I tell my students that, and I said, if you think that that education is wrong, I never want my granddaughter playing with your kid because they're not safe.
Right.
So education is important.
And
You don't have
this
to
is
play
what
with
we
the
tell
gun.
people.
Yeah,
we,
right.
we tell people, look, if you love your kids, even if you hate guns, if you love your kids, you get them safety training. Because I guarantee you, sometime in their life, when they're not inside of their parents, they're going to encounter it, and they need to know what to do safely.
Well, I say one other thing in the classroom too. You know, because it always comes back to what do you want to carry a gun on yourself? And I say no every single time. And here's why: because if the bad guy comes in and they have nefarious intentions, and mine is the first classroom, I'm dead. And if I have a gun on me, I don't want my gun used on students in the classroom. So I don't feel like I want one. Now, the other issue, we can talk about it. I think that there's way out of order because, you know, you got to be 21 to have a gun. Most people are graduating by the time they're 21, or there's just a few seniors. So, you know, there's just so much to it. Could I have one in my office? I don't, you know, the law says no, so I don't. But if somebody had nefarious intentions, they're going to get to me before I can really respond to it. So I'm not sure if guns on campus is the exact right way to go for professors.
Right.
And I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, but I'm also not wanting people to get hurt with my firearm. And so the other students, if, you know, I think they need to know what's the difference between single action and double action. Do you want lasers on these things and safety issues? Because, you know, you don't want a bunch of cowboys out there shooting it up, because when the cops come through the door, it's see gun, shoot gun.
Right.
So there's just a whole lot of training, a whole lot of discussion.
A lot
that
of
has
things to
go
think
on in
about.
these. Yes, absolutely.
So how many colleges have gun safety programs as part of their, you know, their
Akron has a range, actually, and I've shot at that range.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, phys ed course, I'd love to have had that when I was
Yeah.
in school for the 1 hour of credit or whatever you had.
And I
but,
hear every once in a while other schools are coming back to actually gun safety, and it would just be great.
it would be great just to have the safety aspect.
The safety is important.
So we
It's
have
not
45 seconds left. How much pushback do you get at the collegiate level for some of the things you talk about and stuff? Do you see that, or are you pretty free to?
It's academic freedom issue, and the universities have been sued a lot over trying to push back on it. And there are a lot of organizations, fires out there, and Heterodox Academy. There's a couple other out there that are defending First Amendment rights. But my university hasn't come after me for anything because they know I'm dealing with people who want to be Leos.
Right.
So they got to have the conversation about what is this. You know?
When I first heard what you're doing, I said, "Is he tenured? Is he tenured?"
No, I'm a non-tenured track.
Okay,
too,
all
yeah.
right. I just wanted
Yeah,
to make sure.
I hide behind the academic freedom. But my university doesn't really say anything. And I always, when I come out, I always say that I'm not an agent of the university.
course.
I'm
Well,
speaking
God
as a
bless
concerned
Kent
citizen,
State.
yeah.
So-
Well, hey, thank you so much for stopping in.
It is the
Thanks for-
50th anniversary, right, of May
Hey,
4th. So
right,
they're
right.
talking
That's
about
right.
that.
It is. It
That's
is.
right.
That's
Thanks
right.
for spending
Yeah,
time
absolutely.
with
I
us.
appreciate it,
Thanks
guys.
for
Thanks so
having
much.
me up there.
Absolutely.
And stuff.
Yeah,
We'll
they
definitely
want
have
you back.
Okay.
The students, you were a hit for sure.
That's great.
Right.
Next week, guys, it's our annual What's on Our Christmas List.
What's on the Christmas
So,
list?
JC, you got a
All
week to
right.
pin it down. I know Pop already has a list,
Oh,
so
yeah.
and he always has a list.
Yeah, I have to write mine on a list of toilet paper. It's that long. So that's
He's-
the only piece of paper I have that'll go.
Thanks
So-
to Emily on the backside
Eric,
who
JC,
tried to
thank you
keep
very
us
much, guys.
in line. Have a great week. Go Bucks. I haven't checked the score lately, but I'm sure that we'll probably
Yeah, we're probably
at least
not
I hope.
losing. Yeah, so, okay.
All right. Have a good week, and we'll be back next week.
From the Elk and Elk Studios, Elk and Elk has won over $1 billion for their injured clients. Call 1-800-ELK-OHIO. News Radio 610, WTVN.
Hi, I'm Rick Germain, and I'm excited to announce that the Hatfield Auto Mall is now the Germain Auto Mall. Hatfield Volkswagen is now Germain Volkswagen.
Hey there, Em.
Yeah, 1 second.
Yep.
Are you getting feedback?
No, not at all.
Okay, ready whenever you are.
Okay, here we go. Wait, hold on 1 sec.
Well, there was a time that they were trying to they wanted to get rid of Kent State. Then there was a time that they wanted
Okay, here we go. This is Eric from OnTarget. This week we release our annual Christmas list, and I have the Gun of the Week, sponsored by LEPD Training. Tune in Saturday at noon or live from LEPD.